while there are amazing tools out there, the nature of our industry and the business is that we typically don't implement them properly or fully to their ability because we sign a contract, we have a date in 2 months that we have to deliver against. Let's just do MVP and get back to it.
Welcome to another episode of the Ecommerce Toolbox Expert's Perspective. Joining us today, we got Ron Ijack all the way from snowy Toronto. For those that know, I'm not too far away in Ottawa. We got hit with a massive snowstorm this morning, and Ron is the CTO over at Knix. He has a long history with Canadian top retail brands, Roots, Canada Goose, and the list goes on. So welcome, Ron. Really excited to have you on the show.
Thanks, Colin. Nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no worries. I always like to start off by learning a bit more about you. Talk to us a bit about your career journey. I kind of hinted already that you've been at some of the major international players that have come out of Canada, like the Knix and the Canada Gooses. But yeah, maybe talk to us a bit about your career journey and how you ended up as the CTO of Knix.
Sure. So actually my time in retail is fairly recent. I've only been in retail for the last 6 years or so. As you mentioned, before Knix, I was with Roots for 3.5 years. Then I would spend some time with Canada Goose. I started my career as a developer. I built my first website in 1997 when the internet was just coming up and really kind of fell in love with it. Spent the late 90s and early 2000s as a webmaster, web developer at a lot of different startup companies in the Toronto area at the time. Went through the boom and the crash of the .com era at the beginning, but really my core is hands on keyboards, writing code. I spent a bunch of time with startups, then moved to multimedia for a while. I spent a few years with the Globe and Mail running their web development team and some time with Postmedia running their agile transformation. And then right before retail, I spent about 6.5 years at a small startup that call center software. I ran their development team and grew the software and the customer base. We started with a team of 4, ended up with a team of 70, no customer to over 100 customers. And then I moved to the other side of the table from the seller to the buyer and been in retail ever since. And joined Knix in September of last year.
I love it. So as technology has changed a lot over the last decade, I'm curious, as a technology leader within a retail brand, how have you viewed how retailers should do technology? I know that, for example, 10 years ago, a lot of people were building their own custom infrastructure, a lot of first-party code, wasn't really a developed app ecosystem. What's your view on technology and how has that potentially shifted over the last 10 years when it comes to being a retail leader?
So as I said, right before I joined retail, I spent time with the software company and our product was software. Our product was the code that we were writing. So that was one way of looking at everything we did. And when I joined Canada Goose initially, that was still my view that I need to have the best software. I need to have the best coding standards. I need to do everything perfectly. And then shortly after, I realized I sell codes. I don't sell software. So I needed to change my mindset to figure out how technology can support selling more codes. Because ultimately our goal is not to have the best software. Our goal is not to have the best systems or the most unique experiences to sell more codes. And to that degree, I realize at times we still need to build. At times, a lot more times we will be buying. Because in retail, most of us are not doing anything that unique. All of us are more or less doing the same thing. We build the product, we get the product in, we ship the product, we sell the product, we deal with customer information. And the ecosystem for technology in retail is insane. There are so many tools and so many systems that most of the times I'd rather not build my own. Where the changes happen, I think, and where I'm putting a lot of focus is on the integration side of things. And I want to make sure that while I buy software to do certain things, how those tools integrate is something that I own internally with my team. So I'm really focusing on creating both from an architecture point of view and from a process point of view, something that will be highly agile and adaptable to change. Because even if I spend, to your point, 10 years ago, I'll spend a year or two building my own custom system, something new is going to come up and they're going to want to change it. So I have to be able to create the right architecture that will allow me to change systems and create the right process that will embrace change versus a challenge.
Do you think the pendulum has swung too far? What do you think the right mix is? Like, we went from custom code to everything looks the same and it's a template that's drag and drop. And obviously that's, I'm speaking in extremes, but like, I'm curious, like, what's your thoughts on that?
I think that has swung a little bit too far, especially in my role right now. I get 10, 15 emails a day, at least, or contact requests a day from different software providers that are all valuable tools. But I think we've gone into something I started calling SaaS in the industry in the last few years, and that software is a shiny object. I think there are so many tools and so many promises being made, and everybody is trying to get to that promised lands. But really, it starts with your business. What is your unique product offering? What is your unique customer experience? Technology is an enabler. We never start with technology. Even when you talk AI, you talk about even the more complex things, we don't start with technology. We start with the business. I sell underwear. That's the most important thing for me right now. How do I sell more underwear? So it always starts with the business needs. Technology is a tool to enable the business.
I'm curious, and not to challenge you on that, but you've obviously been through a few platform shifts: offline, online, on-prem, cloud, mobile, now potentially mobile AI, question mark. Talk to me a bit about, have you ever seen like a platform shift so big in retail that, not say technology first, but technology really needed to be factored in? And I think one that really comes to mind is mobile, for example. I think that was potentially a change in consumer patterns. But I'm curious, obviously, this is just my thoughts and you kind of lived it. So I'm curious to hear yours.
I mean, technology is critical and it is key, but I look at it almost like electricity in your house. It just needs to work. It can't be the main thing and the leading thing. There is a lot of work we do in technology to integrate systems, to build our own custom systems, but it's still just another tool to sell more underwear. And everything we do has to be leading towards that objective and that goal.
Love it. Knix is known for their online or just their overall innovative customer experience. Obviously, we've all seen the stores, especially if you're in Canada. Talk to me a bit about how you've helped kind of elevate the online experience. We don't have to talk about any vendor specifically, but like, I'm curious, like, how have you leveraged technology to drive that online experience? And like, how do you think about it? Like, do you start at the end in terms of like what you want to deliver to the customer and then kind of back into that? Curious just to hear some of your kind of mental models.
A lot of times, yes, we start with the desired user experience. How do we want the user to be, and how do we want the user to behave? How do we want the user to feel? How do we want our customers to buy? And once again, as I mentioned, technology is the underlying foundational enabler for that. We have to make sure that if we want to provide personalized experiences, that data is flowing between all the different systems correctly. If we want to utilize tools for inventory allocation, we have to make sure that it gets the right sales information, gets other. So really, as a lot of what we do in technology and retail, I found over the last 6 years or so, we move data around. Like that's, I would say 70% of what we do is move data between systems. So how do we move it properly in a secure, safe way? How do we make the data available into every system that needs it in real time, if possible, or at as small as possible delay? And how do we connect all the different experiences between web, store, and even more complex for us right now, we're entering a lot of, not entering, but we're enhancing a lot of other channels like B2B. We're doing some work on Amazon, Costco, things like that. So that creates even a bigger challenge because within your own space, you can control data, you can control customer behavior, but that becomes harder when your product starts selling in other places. And then we switch our focus to product-led information. How do we make sure that our other channels can relay the same product data and product information that we have? So how do we send that data to all the different channels that we have?
And you're going to be speaking coming up in detail on omnichannel, and Knix is a really interesting kind of use case and story. I feel like it's potentially similar to Canada Goose in a sense where you're now investing.
Very different actually, because Canada Goose started with B2B and they were B2B for many years. Knix started DTC online only. So when Joanna started the company, I think about 12 years ago, it was an online only brand, and DTC online like really quickly. And now, as we're adding all these different channels and verticals, we have about 12 stores right now. I'm going to be opening some more. As I said, we have a B2B channel, we have an Amazon channel, we have Costco channel, and so on. So it makes it a lot more challenging, but a little different than the way Canada Goose was, because Canada Goose went B2B first. And then when they became so beloved, they switched also to DTC. But I think they started online and then added physical stores.
Yeah, exactly. That was more so my point where, like, you're bang on, by the way, obviously went B2B to D2C and then D2C to opening up its own retail footprints that kind of started to potentially compete against the B2B. And on the next side, you guys are D2C, and then you're flipping into opening up your own stores as well. I'm curious, as you're looking at delivering those kind of omnichannel experiences, from what I heard, that you guys are planning on opening up potentially up to 20 new locations over the next couple of years. How are you thinking of that going from D2C to omni-channel, and then, to your point, layering in additional channels? How are you architecting that from like a software standpoint from a high level? Because to your work, a lot of it becomes, I guess, integration work.
Yeah, and I'm a big believer in data-centric composable architecture. As I mentioned before, I'm architecting and I'm building for change. So, for example, I don't connect systems directly to each other anymore. So if I need to connect my POS with my ERP, I'm not going to create a direct connection between my POS and my ERP. I typically build a middleware, and all connections, all data goes to that middleware. I store the data, which makes it available for reporting, for other things. And usually I collect the data, transform the data, and then I make it available for any other system that needs it. Really, we always deal with a lot of the same type of information: product information, sales information, customer information. And a lot of different systems need the same data, but in slightly different formats. So once I bring all the data to my middleware and to my data warehouse and I have it all, transforming it and sending it becomes that much easier. And it becomes more flexible. So if right now we use POS X that is connected to a bunch of things through middleware, and eventually we want to switch to POS Y, I don't need to change all the connections. I just need to change one connection. So I don't know what the future is going to bring. 3 years ago, I was in an event. All the talk was on the metaverse. Everything was metaverse. Now it's all AI. Who knows what it's going to be in 2 years? All I know is that whatever I have right now is most likely going to need to change. So I'm really focusing on using cloud-based providers only. I don't have anything on-prem. I want to reduce my costs in that case. And I want to be able to easily get the best of breed for the different work that I do. I think the days of the monolithic application that does everything are probably gone. And really now we're at a point with the way systems are built and integrated that we can't pick the best of breed even for the most minor work stream, and just make sure that it's connected properly to the rest of the work streams.
That's really interesting. It makes a lot of sense because, to your point, you don't want to set it up so that if a new channel emerges that didn't exist 2 years ago, you basically have to change your architecture every time.
And that's exactly it. An order is an order, a customer is a customer, a product is a product with different attributes.
Do you need to build your own data lake? And we can, if we get too in the weeds, we can pull ourselves out. But like, is that really the only way of doing that? If you want to be everywhere, multi-channel, multi-country, multi-region, like, do you have to build your own data lake? Or is there what are your thoughts on that?
I don't think you have to. I think you can still do the integrations without storing the data that's in transit, but you still need to do the integration. But you get the additional benefit of storing that data as you're moving it already. Since you're already touching and moving it, why not store it? And then be able to leverage business intelligence and eventually AI on that data, because AI is great, but it's only as good as the data that you're feeding it. So we're not building our own. I mean, we use Snowflake, and again, we use tools that are out there and systems that are out there. I have a fairly small team. I can't build my own data, whereas nor do I want to. They spend 100% of their time making that great. There's no way I can compete, but I want to use it to the best of its ability. So while I don't think it's mandatory, I think it's very, very desired and helpful. I'm also, as an aside to that, there's always a lot of conversations about A system of record of system of origin is one thing, but system of record, what is your system of record for inventory? What is your system of record for a product or customer? And I don't believe in system of record. I focus on latency of data movement between systems. Because no matter if your ERP is your system of record for inventory, your website is not looking at it most of the time in real time. It's looking at its own database. So to me, I focus on making sure the synchronization of data as fast as possible. And by storing that data and making it available for multiple applications, I'm working towards getting to 1 second or real time between all systems. It's not easy and it's not cheap, but that's the ultimate goal.
You actually answered my question. I realized I didn't ask it properly. It was less about building your own actual data lake or data warehouse, and it was more so actually having one. Because most retailers I talk to just straight up don't have one. To your point, like there's Snowflake, there's other ones, but like Snowflake's a great example. Like you're not going to retail the Snowflake within a retail business. Completely aligned on that. But yeah, candidly, most retailers that I chat with don't even have a data lake in place. And they use their platform, whether it's Shopify, Salesforce, or Adobe, as the system of record. And then everything kind of just plugs into it.
Yeah, it plugs into it, and then it makes it more challenging to do reporting and business analysis on data that is in more than one system. By bringing all the data to Snowflake, whether it's from my ERP or my OMS or Shopify or whatever it is, I can now start cross-stitching data and creating different insight that is not available just from one app, because all my customer data is in my CDP, my sales data is in Shopify, my ERP data is somewhere else. By bringing it all inside, I can really gain intelligence that I wouldn't otherwise just by looking at a single system.
How critical do you think it'll be for the platforms? And I'm not talking just e-com platform. I'm talking we've seen kind of the SaaSification of everything, right? Whereas like before, maybe you used an on-prem solution where you got the code base, you deployed it, kind of like the ATG stuff. And then it went super SaaS, and you might not have access to a lot of the data that you need. Like when you're evaluating platforms, how important is it for you to be able to actually pull your own customer data or certain insights out of the platform into your Snowflake instance?
It's critical. And honestly, in the last couple of years, I haven't encountered many or any vendors that didn't have that capability. I think as these cloud providers becoming more and more mature, it's standard. You have to have APIs. You have to have real-time integration. The old flat files for a lot of modern ones don't even work anymore. So I think getting access to data is something I make sure that I have, whether it's in real time or once a day, once a week, depending on what I need the data for. I do make sure that I have, and there is no shortage of vendors right now. If I'm looking for a PIM, and I'm talking to 3 vendors, 2 of them can get me the data, 1 can't, that vendor is not going to be considered anymore. I haven't encountered a real blocker to getting data out of systems and into my own. Now, some data I don't want to bring to my own systems. I don't want to worry about PII. I don't want to worry about credit card information, things like that. I don't want to bring that into my systems because I don't want to worry about that. But everything else I do try and bring in.
Makes a lot of sense, Ron. And as we look to wrap up, this has been a phenomenal episode. We have a lot of C-level CTOs, a lot of digital leaders that listen. Do you have kind of one piece of advice for them going into 2025? What's really top of mind for you?
I'll say something that's probably not expected from me, but I think we all need to slow down. As I mentioned before, the SaaSo problem is becoming a big problem in my opinion. And while there are amazing tools out there, the nature of our industry and the business is that we typically don't implement them properly or fully to their ability because we sign a contract, we have a date in 2 months that we have to deliver against. Let's just do MVP and get back to it. We never get back to it because it's retail. We just got to keep going, keep selling. Retail is Groundhog Day. It's the same thing year after year. We're in planning and execution now. Then we're going to get into peak, strategy for next year, and so on. And I think, not specifically Knix, I've seen it in several places that a lot of times the tech stack is becoming bloated, is not integrated properly between systems. And the business then feels that, okay, this is a bad tool. I need to go bring a new one. And I'm trying to slow things down a little bit and make sure that we actually implement and use the tools that we have properly before we're adding more to it. We're always going to add a little bit, but we really need to, I'll speak for myself, but I think a lot of CTOs probably going to be in the same position. We need to almost slow down a little bit, not stop, but we need to slow down a little bit and really make sure that the technology is doing what it's supposed to be, which is selling more stuff and not just technology for the sake of technology, which I think I have seen some CTOs or CIOs do take that route. That's just not the way I look at it. I'm looking at what I need to do to sell more. And right now it's simplify and kind of go back to basics a little bit, because we were able to sell without all those gadgets and without all those widgets because we had good product. And I think now we're all so hungry for that personalization and so hungry for all that data that I think sometimes we're losing track of what we're actually trying to do.
Makes sense. We see it a lot as well. And Ron, I really appreciate it. It was a fantastic episode. Thank you so much for sitting in.
Thank you. It's been fun.
The Ecommerce Toolbox Expert Perspectives is brought to you by Noibu. To find out more about Noibu and how we can help you debug your e-commerce site and rocket your revenue, visit www.noibu.com. That's Noibu.com. And then make sure to search for the Ecommerce Toolbox Expert Perspectives on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found, and click subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Noibu, thanks for listening.